It was one of those slow, comforting Sunday mornings, birds outside, coffee brewing, the faint hum of our old laptop waking up. I wasn't snooping, I just needed to print a receipt. That's all. But then, right there on the desktop, I saw it. A file named Moving Plan, Seattle with L. My heart skipped a beat so sharp it almost hurt. My first thought was innocent. Maybe a work file. Maybe something harmless. But something in my gut said otherwise. I stared at it for a long moment, trying to convince myself to walk away. I couldn't. Curiosity, dread, something primal. It pushed my hand forward. I double-clicked. Inside there were apartment listings, job transfer forms, and even wedding venue options. My fingers went cold. I scrolled further, pulse pounding, until one line made me stop breathing. Need to sell the house quietly so Elena doesn't suspect. That's when it hit me. He wasn't planning to leave me. He was planning to erase me. I sat there frozen, staring at the words like they were written in fire. My hands trembled so hard I could barely keep the mouse steady. Seattle with L. The letter burned in my mind. L. Who was she? Some coworker? Someone he met on one of his business trips? I whispered her initial out loud, tasting bitterness with every syllable. L. Who's L? The room suddenly felt smaller, heavier, like the air itself knew a secret I didn't. I scrolled further, desperate and terrified at the same time. Photos of rental apartments, notes about a new start, and tucked between them a to-do list, close joint accounts, transfer savings, finalize relocation date. Each line cut a little deeper. It wasn't just betrayal. It was premeditation. I whispered, "Oh, you coward," though the sound of my voice barely reached my own ears. That's when it sank in. He wasn't hesitating. He'd already moved on, emotionally, physically, strategically. The only thing he forgot to do was tell me. And in that awful silence, I realized something I'd never said out loud. I'd been living beside a stranger who'd been planning my disappearance, one spreadsheet at a time. For a long time, I just sat there, the screen glowing like a cruel spotlight on my new reality. Every keystroke he had made in that file felt like a quiet betrayal replaying in my mind. I thought about the late nights he claimed to be catching up on work, the sudden interest in real estate podcasts, the way he'd started locking his phone. It all lined up now, piece by piece, like a puzzle designed to humiliate me. My pulse was steady again, but my thoughts weren't. Something inside me snapped into focus. I closed the document carefully, almost tenderly, as if I were tucking away evidence from a crime scene. The irony wasn't lost on me. He'd been planning a relocation, and I'd just relocated in my mind, from shock to strategy. My heart still hurt, but beneath it was something new, something sharp and steady. It wasn't despair. It was resolve. The smell of burnt coffee pulled me back to the present. I poured it down the sink, staring at the reflection in the window. A woman I barely recognized, eyes fierce and unflinching. I didn't know it yet, but that morning wasn't the end of something. It was the quiet, deliberate beginning of my revenge. By the time David came home that evening, I'd already rehearsed every breath. The house smelled like roasted chicken and rosemary. Comfort food, the perfect disguise. He walked in all smiles, kissed my cheek like a man proud of his day, and said, "Hey, honey, you won't believe it. My company might offer me a position in Seattle. Big promotion." Seattle. The word twisted in my stomach like poison wrapped in silk. I smiled, but every part of me was screaming. "Seattle?" I asked, careful to sound curious, not cornered. "That's interesting. When did that come up?" He shrugged, too casual, too polished. "Just this week. Still early talks." I watched him talk, every lie practiced, every detail almost rehearsed. He wasn't nervous, not yet. But I could see the faint tension in his jaw, the flicker of guilt behind the charm. I wanted to reach across the table and scream. Instead, I lifted my wine glass, calm as stone, and said, "And will you be going alone?" He let out a small laugh, the kind men use to dodge danger. "Of course," he said. "I mean, who else would I go with?" I smiled back, my face a mask I'd learned to wear in one afternoon. But under that calm surface, I was already rewriting the ending to his little story. Dinner felt like theater, and I was the only one who knew the script. He talked about work, travel, the big opportunity, while I nodded, cutting pieces of chicken I couldn't taste. Every word he spoke was a test. Every pause, a chance for me to study the man I'd once trusted with everything. I noticed things I'd ignored before. The slight tremor in his hand when I asked about timing, the way he couldn't quite meet my eyes when I mentioned our house. He was performing, but not well. I asked gentle, harmless questions about the city, the job, the weather, pretending to be supportive. "You've always wanted something new, haven't you?" I said softly. He smiled, relief washing over his face, mistaking my curiosity for care. He thought I was the same woman who'd believed him for years. Poor man. He didn't realize the audience had changed, and the show was about to end. When he excused himself to take a work call, I watched him step into the hallway, his voice low, conspiratorial. I could have followed him, listened through the door, but I didn't need to. I already knew the truth. As I sat alone at that table, candlelight flickering over his untouched wineglass, I whispered, "Enjoy your little fantasy, David, because I'm about to rewrite your relocation plans." When he finally came back, he wore that practiced grin, the one that used to charm me before I learned what it really hid. He poured himself more wine, changed the subject, talked about a new project at work. I nodded along, smiling at the right moments, pretending to be the doting wife who didn't just uncover his second life that morning. My voice stayed light, but inside, every word was calculation. He thought we were having dinner. I was dissecting him. After he went to bed, I sat in the dim kitchen, the clock ticking like a metronome to my fury. I replayed every lie, every deflection, every touch of his hand that suddenly felt foreign. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was clarity. For years, I'd been building a life with a man who was quietly dismantling it behind my back. Now, I wasn't the woman being left. I was the woman preparing her counterattack. I washed the dishes slowly, almost meditatively, the water running warm over my fingers. There was a calmness in me, the kind that only comes before a storm. Upstairs, I could hear him breathing, peacefully asleep. I looked up toward the ceiling, my jaw tightening. "Sleep well, David," I whispered. "You'll need the rest." The next morning, I woke up with a kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years. Not peace, precision. I brewed my coffee, stared at the rising steam, and realized that heartbreak had sharpened me. While David hummed in the shower, I drafted my own plan, not of escape, but of control. I wasn't going to beg or confront him in tears. No, that would give him power. I wanted him to watch everything he built, everything he thought he controlled, quietly unravel in his hands. I called Clara, my oldest friend. We hadn't spoken in months, but she owed me a favor, and she was the kind of woman who never asked why until after she'd already said yes. "I found something," I said. "A document. He's planning to leave me and take everything." There was a pause, heavy but calm. "Do you want me to help you get him before he gets you?" she asked. I took a breath. "Yes," quietly. From that moment, we stopped being friends and became co-conspirators. We planned with the precision of surgeons, every move deliberate, every detail foolproof. Clara handled the legal logistics. I handled the emotional theater. For the first time in a long time, I felt alive, not as a wife, but as a strategist. The plan came together like a quiet symphony, subtle, deliberate, almost elegant. While David spent his days pretending to be the loving husband, I spent mine preparing my freedom. I transferred part of our savings into a private account under my name, something I should have done years ago. Then I made copies of his moving plan file, saving one on a flash drive and another on a cloud he didn't even know existed. Evidence was my new currency, and I was collecting it like gold. At night, when he fell asleep beside me, I studied his face. Peaceful, trusting, undeserving. How many nights had I laid there, believing his half-smiles and tired excuses? I wondered if he could feel the shift in my energy, if somewhere inside, his body knew the tides were turning. He murmured something in his sleep once. Lydia. The name cracked through the silence like lightning. My hand clenched around the blanket, but I didn't wake him. No, I wanted him to dream. During the day, Clara helped me draft the perfect paper trail. She was brilliant, sharp where I was patient. Together, we created an invisible thread of evidence leading straight to him. By the end of the week, the trap was set. All I had to do now was wait for him to take the bait. That night, I prepared one final touch, something poetic. While David watched TV in the living room, laughing at a sitcom, I opened his laptop on the kitchen counter and typed a new document. Its title mirrored his, Elena's Moving Plan. Inside, I wrote just one line. I know everything. Then I saved it to his desktop and left the screen glowing under the soft kitchen light, a silent confession waiting to be found. When I finally walked past him, he looked up with that effortless grin. You going to bed early? He asked. I smiled back and said, yes. Long day tomorrow. He didn't notice the slight tremor of satisfaction in my voice, or the fact that I didn't kiss him goodnight. Upstairs, I listened as he turned off the TV, footsteps echoing toward the kitchen. A pause, then the faint click of the mouse. Perfect. I laid in bed, heart steady, almost serene. It wasn't guilt that kept me awake. It was anticipation. I could already picture his face when he read those 3 words, the panic tightening around his throat. He thought he was the architect of this story, but by morning, he'd learn who really held the blueprints. The sound of his footsteps the next morning was different, heavier, rushed, unsteady. I was sitting at the table with my coffee when he stormed into the kitchen, laptop in hand, his face drained of color. What's this? He demanded, voice cracking. What the hell does this mean? He slammed the laptop down, the screen still open to my message. I looked at it briefly, then back at him, and said softly, It means you're not the only one making plans. His jaw tightened. You went through my computer? He barked. That's a violation of... I raised an eyebrow, letting the pause slice through his sentence. Privacy? Like the kind you gave me while writing love letters to Lydia? His mouth fell open, eyes darting like a trapped animal's. It's not what you think, he stammered. Of course it wasn't. It never is, until it is. I leaned back in my chair, watching him fumble for excuses like a man trying to catch water with his hands. The same man who once prided himself on control now looked small, exposed, cornered. I didn't shout, didn't cry. I didn't need to. Silence, I'd learned, was a much sharper weapon. He tried to regain his footing, his tone softening in that manipulative way I knew too well. Elena, please, he said, voice trembling just enough to sound sincere. It was just fantasy. I wasn't going to... I cut him off, my tone cold and deliberate. Don't. Lie. Again. The words landed like glass breaking between us. I slid an envelope across the table, the sound of paper against wood far louder than his pleading. His eyes flicked down, and I watched the realization spread across his face as he saw the divorce papers. He sank into the chair opposite me, shoulders collapsing. You can't be serious, he whispered. You're overreacting. It was never real. I took a slow sip of coffee, my hand steady. Oh, it was real enough for you to find apartments, transfer funds, and plan a wedding. You weren't just leaving me, David. You were replacing me. The truth was simple, brutal, and finally mine to say aloud. For a moment, neither of us moved. The morning light cut across the table like a spotlight, dividing us in half, past and future. He looked smaller in that light, like a man watching his empire crumble. And I, for the first time, didn't feel broken. I felt free. He reached for me then, a desperate gesture, half apology, half habit. I stepped back before his fingers could touch my sleeve. You're free to go live your fantasy, I said, my voice calm but firm, but you'll be paying for it in installments. His lips parted, but no words came out. For once, he had nothing left to spin. He'd built his betrayal on silence and lies, and now both had turned against him. I picked up my coffee cup and turned away, signaling the end. Behind me, I could hear him breathing unevenly, pacing like a man waiting for a verdict he already knew. I didn't need to raise my voice. The strength was in the stillness. When I finally faced him again, his eyes were glossy, almost childlike, a man stripped of his performance. "You did this to yourself, David," I said. "You typed your own ending. I just read it aloud." And in that moment, I saw the truth settle into him like a slow poison. When he left, the door shut with a dull, final thud, not dramatic, just definitive. The house fell silent again, except for the faint ticking of the clock. That sound used to remind me of routine. Now it felt like liberation. I exhaled slowly, my heart steady. I wasn't just surviving the fallout, I was orchestrating it. And tomorrow, the next move would be his to watch, not mine to make. A week later, the storm finally reached him. I didn't have to lift a finger. Clara had already set everything in motion. One discreet email from her to his company's ethics board, attached with his relocation document and the love-soaked messages to Lydia, was all it took. The man who thought he could juggle deceit and ambition was suddenly exposed under fluorescent lights in HR jargon. Breach of trust, they called it. I preferred the word karma. When I got the news, I was sipping tea on the balcony, watching the sunrise. The world felt balanced again. Not perfect, not healed, just fair. Clara texted me, "He's been terminated, effective immediately." I smiled at her choice of words. Terminated. Clean, efficient, final. The kind of ending he never planned for me. Later that day, he showed up at the house, our old house, looking nothing like the man who'd once bragged about promotions and plans. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. He pounded on the door like a beggar asking for mercy, not money. I opened it just enough to meet his gaze, not enough to invite him back in. "Elena," he gasped, "you ruined me." I almost laughed when he said that. You ruined me, as if he hadn't spent months drafting his own destruction in secret. I stepped outside, the breeze catching the edge of my robe, and looked at him the way one might look at a stranger asking for directions to a place that no longer exists. "No, David," I said quietly. "You did that the moment you typed her name into your plans." His lips trembled, searching for something to say, but I could see it in his eyes, the realization that the life he'd built on lies was gone for good. He tried to plead, his words spilling over each other, half apologies, half accusations. "It was just a mistake. I was confused. We can fix this." But I didn't flinch. The days of negotiation were over. He was standing on the ashes of what he'd burned, and I was done offering shelter. "Go home, David," I told him softly. "Wherever that is now." He blinked, stunned by how calm I was, how final it all sounded. When I closed the door, it wasn't anger that guided me. It was clarity. The lock clicked, and the sound echoed through the hallway like punctuation, the end of one story, the clean start of another. I leaned against the door for a moment, exhaling, feeling the strange, weightless quiet that follows justice. It wasn't revenge that satisfied me most. It was peace. After he left, I wandered through the house, our house, one last time. Every corner carried echoes of a life I'd outgrown. The kitchen still smelled faintly of the coffee we used to share on Sundays. The office, where it all began, was spotless now, the laptop gone, the desk bare. It struck me how silence could feel so complete when there's no deceit left to fill it. This wasn't the emptiness of loss. It was the quiet of reclamation. I packed the last box, just a few framed photos, a plant I'd managed to keep alive, and the flash drive that held every piece of proof. I didn't need it anymore, but I liked the symbolism of keeping it close. As I loaded the car, the neighbor waved, asked if I was finally moving. "Yes," I said, smiling, "but not where he planned." And it felt good, simple, final, like closing a book that had overstayed its shelf life. When I drove away, I didn't look back. The rearview mirror reflected only light, No ghosts, no regrets. I wasn't the woman who found a file anymore. I was the woman who rewrote the ending. And though he'd tried to relocate his life without me, I'd found my own destination. One built on truth, not illusion. Months passed before I truly felt settled again. My new apartment wasn't large or luxurious, but it was mine. Every inch of it chosen by me. For me. The walls were pale cream, the scent of fresh paint still lingering like a quiet promise. On the desk sat a framed photo of me in Italy, smiling at a sunset that no longer reminded me of anyone else. Freedom doesn't come with fireworks, I've learned. It comes in small, steady moments, like waking up and realizing your peace no longer depends on someone else's presence. I built new routines, morning walks, afternoon coffee by the window, the occasional dinner with Clara where we toasted to poetic justice. Sometimes we'd joke about it, how she'd managed to ruin his career with a single email. He planned to start a new life, she'd say, clinking her glass against mine, and you just helped him move a little faster. We'd laugh, not out of cruelty, but out of relief. The laughter of survivors, not victims. Still, there were quiet nights when I'd sit at my desk, fingers tracing the edge of that Italy photo, thinking about how everything can shift in a single click. Betrayal had once felt like the end of my story. Now I saw it for what it was. The plot twist that finally set me free. One morning, I got a call from Clara. Her voice carried that familiar mix of mischief and warmth. "So," she said, "how's Seattle?" I nearly choked on my coffee, laughing out loud. "Oh, I didn't move there," I told her. "I just sent him a postcard saying, 'Thanks for the idea.'" She burst into laughter so contagious that I had to sit down to keep from spilling my drink. That tiny act of irony, that postcard, was the final chapter he'd never get to edit. After we hung up, I found myself smiling for a long time. Not the polite smile I used to wear at dinner tables, but the real kind. The kind that comes when you know you've reclaimed your own narrative. Seattle had been his fantasy of freedom. For me, freedom turned out to be something simpler: a quiet apartment, sunlight on the floor, and the ability to laugh again without bitterness in my chest. I still keep that postcard's copy tucked in my journal. A reminder that sometimes revenge doesn't need to be loud. Sometimes it's as subtle as a postage stamp, as powerful as laughter sent across 1,000 miles. Sometimes I think about the woman I was before that morning, the one who thought love meant loyalty, even at the cost of herself. She deserved better, and for the longest time I thought she'd never get it. But sitting here now, in this small apartment filled with sunlight and second chances, I realize she did. I did. Healing didn't arrive in grand gestures. It arrived in the stillness of knowing I finally chose myself. Every so often, I wonder where David ended up. If he stayed in Seattle, if Lydia stuck around long enough to see the ruin beneath his charm. But then I remind myself that it doesn't matter. His story no longer writes itself into mine. My peace doesn't need his chaos to exist, and that, more than anything, feels like victory. He planned to start a new life without me, so I started mine without him, and made sure he couldn't afford his.